Alrighty, everybody. Well, good afternoon. It looks like we still have some folks joining us. I will be letting people in periodically here, but we're going to go ahead and get started so we can stick with time today. So, welcome everybody to our first session of the Municipal Education Series on microgrids. My name is Rachel. I'm a program consultant with GEO. So, before Michael kicks us off, I want to just review a couple of things with you all. First, this session is being recorded. And will be posted on the GEO website at a later date. We would ask that everybody keep their cameras and microphones off during this session so we can pay attention to our speakers. We should have enough time for Q&A at the end of the session as well. So if you have any questions for the speakers during the presentation, please put them in the chat. I will be monitoring and collecting them so that we can review them during the Q&A session. And then if you're having any technical difficulties, go ahead and email me. I will put my email address in the chat here soon. Yeah, if you have any issues, I will help you out. But with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Michael, I will pass this over to you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Benson. I'm the board president of GEO. I'm your host for this whole series, and today I'm going to be one of your speakers. So one of the first things we want to identify is who the heck is GEO? So GEO is Green Energy Ohio. We exist to try to get green energy developed in Ohio, not just the big utility scale solar stuff, but any type of green energy that we can apply across the state. One of the most important things is trying to do a smarter energy solution for folks, whether it's municipalities or residential or commercial and industrial, just trying to apply modern technology to a century plus old system. One of the ways that we are doing that is switching our focus to become a market maker nonprofit. What that means is we are kind of doing economic development. So we are trying to get the business world and the commercial folks, private industry type people to come into Ohio to help develop this green energy. And the way that we do that is to create a market for that. So we are trying to incentivize bringing that kind of stuff to the state without being actually part of the state. State of Ohio doesn't do a lot of green energy development, so we're kind of doing it ourselves. So we're filling in that gap across the state of Ohio. As part of that, we created a program called the Distributed Power Program. If you didn't understand that, we're going to explain what all that means later on. But essentially, it's all the smaller parts of the energy system that can be done by individual property owners that want to be able to build things out where they are. And as part of that, we're going to do an education series, and this is the first one. And we are prioritizing and emphasizing municipal-based microgrids. And we'll explain, of course, all of what all that means. But this is one of the first sessions of what we're trying to accomplish here to help educate people as part of our three prongs that we do: promote, educate, and advocate. We're going to educate people about municipal microgrids specifically, and of course, how that can work and operate in a market in Ohio, including the microgrids themselves. So, the way we're going to do that, we're going to do 6 1-hour sessions. This is session number one. It's going to be every other week because we didn't want to take up too much of your time. We know that you either have a temporary budget or a full budget ready to go now. So we want to make sure we're not taking up too much of your time, but we also want to make sure you've got the data and information you need to plan because we're going to run this all the way through to the end of March. So every other week, 1 hour at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Tuesdays. So the next one will be the 20th. We're going to go through all those different 6 sessions and we'll go through specifics on those at the end. And the goal at the end of all of this is that you will understand how this works and how it can be applied in your municipality and what kind of benefits you can get from that. And of course, the process to get you there. So we have got a lot of experts to come on board and speak with us today. And every session as we go along, these are folks who are doing innovative work, especially places in other states that we can apply to the state of Ohio. But the exciting thing is, who are we going to talk with today? So sadly, I'm one of your folks, but the good thing is I brought somebody else in who's a much nicer person than me. Mike Foley from Cuyahoga Green Energy. Mike Foley is the administrator for Cuyahoga Green Energy, Cuyahoga County's new electric utility. Prior to his appointment back in 2024, he was the county sustainability director for about 9 years, and from 2006 to 2014, served in the Ohio General Assembly as a representative from the 14th House District. We won't hold that against you, Mike. We got you out of there safely. Since 2015, he has led the county's efforts developing the first climate change action plan, an award-winning 4 megawatt, and we'll find out what a megawatt is later, landfill solar project, rooftop solar on 4 of their county facilities, a local residential solar group buying co-op with over 400 participants. By the way, still an open co-op available, not just for Cuyahoga County, but for most of Northeast Ohio is open right now. If you want to access the information about that, definitely include that at the end and we'll let you know about that one.
We did 500 last week or 2 weeks ago, Michael. Just
Nicely done. And then, of course, the creation of Cuyahoga Green Energy, which is a new utility focusing on renewable and resilient energy microgrid districts. And then introduce myself. In addition to being the board president for Green Energy Ohio, I am an electrification consultant for local governments. I leveraging an award-winning 30-year career of public service, including innovations which simultaneously improved service and lowered costs. We all love that. We like to do a better job with less money, costing less money. Electrification specifically is what we used and what we're using now, and that means you're switching away from fossil fuel power to electric, and of course, developing the infrastructure necessary for that transition, and that's microgrids. My partner and I actually patented a mission critical microgrid specifically for municipalities so you can have a robust, resilient energy system to support your electrification programs. So, with that introduction, let's get started. Mike's going to tell you what in the world are we dealing with in Ohio?
well, we're not dealing with it just in Ohio, but all over the country right now. So, Ohio, compared to many other states across the country, especially the East Coast and the West Coast, has had relatively cheap power. And all in probably for commercial prices, maybe it's 11 12 cents a kilowatt hour. If you look on the east west coast, it's 18 to 20 25 cents a kilowatt hour depending on where you're at. That's changing. That is changing in Ohio and for the Midwest and the East, and even to the East Coast. There's just not enough generation facilities out there to produce power that is needed, and so there's spikes in prices happening. The grid has not been able to keep up with kind of both the need. It's aging, so there's a lot of outages. There's reliability issues. I live in the city of Lakewood. Michael's got a couple of quotes up here from Lakewood and Barberton. Going after our investor-owned utility, First Energy, but we just got frequent power outages. Little quick stories that we've got a little neighborhood email group, and there's one person who every time the power goes out, is the first one to say power's out again, and it happens pretty frequently in the city of Lakewood. So power reliability is a real big issue, and also what it's generated by is a big issue. And I'll talk a little bit about that when we get to our clean energy group, but also pricing. The economics of electricity are rising fast because there's both infrastructure issues that are not keeping up with demand and the need for more generation. So, Michael, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, and one of the things the reason I put these two quotes, these headlines from Lakewood and Barberton is these local officials and everybody feels like they can't do anything about this. They feel like there's no possibility for them to make this change. And one of the big reasons is we're all afraid of these data centers coming in, and that's a lot of why those quotes for prices are up there. That's the transmission grid quotes that they wanted to get for capacity on the grid. Capacity is the ability to provide electricity by a certain date at a certain amount. And that's the levels that they are paying went from $29 to $270 to over $300, and they yet don't have enough. So the most recent auction that PJM, and PJM, by the way, is our transmission utility, and we'll explain that in a little bit, is going out and getting pricing is because they are not able to meet the capacity that they expect will be required of the grid in the future, and that scares all of us. So with that lack of control, the little blurb at the bottom, our local or state officials have said we need to do something about that. So one of the things they did was pass a law in last May, signed into law by the governor called House Bill 15. And that unlocked the ability to use and build out distributed energy in Ohio. And that's one of the impetuses as to how this all changed and how this started and why we're having these discussions today. So to get PJM that capacity inside the electric grid, we need to build a lot more energy fast and at the lowest cost. And of course, the one that's most available to us is solar and storage and controls. And that is also just happens to be the cleaner option, which is a bonus. And then if you can operate those things together, you can have what they call a virtual power plant. And we're going to go into the details specifically what that means. But I think everybody understands the problem because your electric bills should have gone up. If you're in the state of Ohio, it went up somewhere between 19 and 35%, depending on which electric utility you're in, just this last June. So, like Michael was saying, or like Mike was saying, if you're at 11 cents, you're now probably at 12. And if you were at 9 cents, you might be at 10. And it doesn't seem like a huge amount of money, but that's cents per kilowatt hours, and that's a lot of energy that you're going to use. So you will notice that, especially if you are a municipality and you want to do something about your electric costs. So, with that in mind, you can take control of your energy. So, this is a first set of recommendations for a municipality. The one I like the best is the grab that low hanging fruit first. So energy efficiency still matters, still counts. There may not be programs running with our utilities currently across the state, but hopefully some of that will be coming back. But energy efficiency affects how much energy you are already buying. So if you haven't already done LED lighting, please do that as soon as possible. If you haven't updated your controls and operating your HVAC, please do that and do as much energy efficiency as you possibly can. Then figure out what it is that you need to run your facility and what you can control about that. So, for example, generate more. And Cuyahoga County's got those four locations with solar on their roof. If you aren't doing solar already, you should. The price for solar is way, way lower than it ever has been before. It's almost the automatic best deal for you going to get solar. I just got solar on my house finally, and it was just a timing with my roof. But immediately getting benefits just right off the bat, even on the shortest day of the year. Solar was offsetting the energy cost, which was saving me money and providing me generation on my property. Then, of course, figure out what it is you need for resiliency. What kind of backup power do you need? Not just what the generator can do or some critical loads on your facilities, but how much energy would you need to have if you were affected by a disaster? That's one of the things that municipalities do. And for those of you on the call who are not with a municipality specifically, risk management and being prepared for disasters is part of the program. That's what they're required to do. Not only does the utility have to plan for your worst day, you do the same thing if you are a local government from the county on down to a village or a township. So understand what you've got going on in your facility. Do what you can first. And of course, look to see what is it you would need to have if something really, really bad happened. So if you would like, Mike, do you want to explain just a little bit on why they should build microgrids or what a microgrid would be, or do you want me to cover that?
Why don't you start and I'll add in, I'll jump in. But
Awesome. Okay.
basically,
So basically, a microgrid is a miniature version of the grid. I mean, you essentially are going to build generation, storage, and distribution, which means you're going to create energy, keep energy, and then use the energy as you need. And one of the real nice things about it is if something does happen, you can back off and shut down from or separate from the grid and operate on your own. It's called islanding, and it's a great benefit for you. What's funny is it's called islanding because it was literally where microgrids started on islands where an island might have one wire. It goes out from the mainland out to the island. And of course, if that got cut or went out, they'd have to be able to operate on their own. A lot of what we do right now is using fossil fuel generation. So you're going to run a generator, but the problem with a generator is when it's a big disaster, especially a widespread one, you still have to go get fuel from someplace, and the pumps that run the fuel require electricity. So no matter what you do, the electric being out causes a problem at multiple levels. And of course, once you run out of fuel, you're pretty much done. So you need to design a system that works better, design a system designed for your worst day. And the nice thing is that is a system that can then provide you with benefits that you were not really aware of, which the nice thing is session two of this series, we're going to go a deep dive on those kinds of things. But essentially you get backup power that's also usable power every single day. And we don't want to get too nerdy in this area or too wonky, but your electric bill, most likely, if you're a municipal customer, you are paying demand charges for using electricity on the hot afternoons. Those are the worst days. Those are the most expensive. If you can just avoid that or lower that amount of how much you're using, huge benefits, maybe even enough to help pay for the cost of that microgrid that you want to build. So The exciting thing is we do have a great example of how to do this. So Cuyahoga County took decisive action about this kind of stuff, and Mike is going to be the guy that was going to give us their whole story. But before we get there, we might have a little more to explain. Did I do a good job, Mike? We're good?
Pretty good. That's great.
All right. By the way, Mike does this all the time, so we have to make sure that I'm doing as good a job as what Mike does.
You're doing good.
All right. So most everyone is not an electrical engineer or electrician or someone who works in the energy industry. So they may not necessarily understand the electricity system and the terms that go along with it. So we wanted to get a few of those under your belt. That way you knew what we were talking about, or when somebody else talks about it, you'll be able to use that nomenclature in a way that makes sense for them and a way that makes sense for you. So again, the definition of electrification: switching away from fossil fuels to electricity as your primary power source. That's for tools, equipment, for facilities, and for transportation. So the examples would be buying an electric car. The example would be a battery operated drill. I don't know how anybody buys a corded drill anymore any nowadays. It just doesn't happen. And even on your fire trucks, you're going to find that you have battery operated tools like the big jaws of life that opens up the cars when you have a crash. That actually is now operated by battery, and it's a better, faster, cheaper option than what we used to use with hydraulics and a fossil fuel generator to provide the power. So electrification is making that switch. Microgrids, we kind of hit on that, but really the big one is the islanding of energy that you have that you can control on your own property. The nice thing is the control piece is pretty important to municipalities, which also helps you control your cost. And then, of course, the terms of behind, through, or front of the meter. The reason you need to know this term is the grid, the electric grid operator, your local electric utility looks at you as a meter and a system behind the meter. So when they look at you as an energy, so let's say your facility, your city hall or your township hall or your village hall, you have an electric meter on that building. So they look at you as that meter because that's where you connect to the grid. So when you put things on your city hall, town hall, or village hall, you would be behind the meter. You would be developing a system that actually operates behind that electric meter. You also may want to build something on the field next to your wastewater treatment plant. Wastewater treatment plants use a lot of energy. They use a lot of energy 24/7. So they're also located in spaces where people don't usually live right next door. So they might have some room for solar. And there you would have solar that might be connected not just behind the meter for that local area, but might actually have its own meter connected to the grid. So you can call that front of the meter, but it's not really because the utility has everyone connected with the meters. They know everybody's operating on their system. So even though they say you can use through the meter or front of the meter, in the end, it's just the way that the utility looks at you. We are going to focus on behind the meter with the idea of being able to use your facilities, your infrastructure. So that's the wording that you want to know is behind the meter is where we're going to try to live. So a DER, a distributed energy resource, is a smaller energy device that you have all the way from a controlled thermostat on your wall that's a smart thermostat that you can have your utility tell it to go up or down to either raise the temperature or lower the temperature you're using by a degree or two with an agreement with your utility to help lower demand, to help to deal with demand on the grid itself. That's a very small version of a distributed energy resource, but a microgrid built on your roof. So my house, for an example, I have solar on my roof. I've got battery in my basement. I've got controls attached to it. I've got electric vehicle charging that's also attached to it. That little system that's behind the meter is a distributed energy resource. And the reason we use the word distributed is they are all over the place. They're out at what we call the grid edge, which I will be explaining in a few more slides, so you can see what that means. And those distributed energy resources are where the opportunity lies. One way that somebody refers to it is the grid edge is where the problem is, because when your power goes out, that's where the problem is. Then the grid edge solution can also be at the same location. So let's put that distributed energy resource to work, but then we can combine those distributed energy resources together because if you build something that helps offset your worst day or your expected worst afternoons in the summers, well, then that's available to you every single day. Distributed energy resources are not backup generators. Backup generators are just for backup power when the power is out. Distributed energy resources and microgrids are to be used all of the time. And the nice thing is, if you are a municipality and you're designing for resiliency and mitigation of disaster and dealing with the worst day, then you will have more capacity than normal every single day, which makes you eligible to participate in what they call a virtual power plant. What that actually means is a software system will control those devices and then activate them as needed and provide them to the grid. That capacity auction you saw earlier in the slide with all the problems, that's one of the things that you could participate in. You could actually say, hey, this thing that cost me 30 cents to make happen, I would like to sell to the electric grid at $300. And that would happen maybe 6 times a summer for 15 minutes to 30 minutes long, something like that. That's the type of system you can get into. So now what you need for yourself can actually be used as a power plant and make revenue for the owner of that microgrid. That's the new opportunity that's happening in Ohio that when people really weren't working on before, that House Bill 15 unlocked. The building out of distributed energy resources behind the meter and operating them as a virtual power plant. You don't have to understand all of this from this very short version. We're going to go through this throughout the whole series, which is the reason we're doing this whole thing. Kilowatts and kilowatt hours. So let me explain what that means. For those of you who are not, again, electrical engineers or electricians, a watt is a unit of power and it's volts times amps. So in your house, on your wall, you have a 120 volt, 20 amp plug, most likely somewhere in your workshop, your garage, and that would be a 2.4 kilowatt device. So whatever's attached to it can use 2.4 kilowatts. If you have an electric dryer, that's one of those 240 volt or the two prong breakers in your panel. 240 volts at 30 amps, that's equivalent to 7,200 watts, which is 7.2 kilowatt. That's approximately what you would have if you had an EV charger in your garage. You want to have that level of the system, 240 volts at 30 amps. That's typical house current type stuff. And if you're in a commercial occupancy and you've got 480 volts, it just takes that whole thing and doubles it up and makes it higher. But that gets us to what a watt or a kilowatt would be. A megawatt is a much, much bigger system. And as soon as you start working at a microgrid level that you're going to develop distributed energy resource that's a microgrid, and you're looking at it as a municipality, you're going to be looking at megawatts. For example, if you have electric police cars or ambulances and fire trucks in the future, you're going to need megawatt charging, which is what the over-the-road trucking industry is going to now, megawatt charging. So megawatt charging is 480 volts, but now we're talking 1,250 amps to get to 600 kilowatts, or 800 volts at 1,250 amps to get to 1 megawatt. You may have heard that term 800 volts for 800 volt architecture on the most modern EVs, like that Cybertruck, that crazy looking thing, or on Hyundai's and Kia's. Their electric cars, their new ones, are 800 volt architecture so that they can charge quickly when you're on a trip. So kilowatts and kilowatts are units of power. Kilowatt hours is how many kilowatts you can use in an hour. And those are a term of energy. So it's power and energy. Power is what you can use for the moment. Energy is what you can store. So that's the basics on terms. Those are the basic definitions. The nice thing is all of this is consistent of well-proven technologies that we just have not used much. By the way, solar panels are not new. They're 100 years old. But in the last few years, last 5 to 10 years, they become way, way, way cheaper to operate. And if you're in other countries, that's even cheaper than what we're having to pay here. But at least we're on our way in the US and on our way in Ohio to try to do more. So you get to hear from me for just a couple more slides, but the next thing we're going to talk about is how the grid works. And I did happen to notice in the chat that there was a question about an RTO and a TSO and that kind of stuff. So let's cover that for you. This comes courtesy of David Roberts. He has a podcast called Volts. If you are interested in all this kind of crazy stuff that we're talking about, modern technology, anything related to the climate, whatever kind of stuff, his podcast is one of the best. So David Roberts from Volts wrote an article back in 2018 from Vox and included all these graphics, but they do such a good job of explaining how the electric grid works that I'm going to use those here today. So thanks to him for that. At the top, by the way, this screen right here. This is the traditional electric grid. This is what we all grew up on. This is what we're trying to fix and make better. But it was designed as well as it possibly can when we talked about doing electrification of the United States, uh, getting rural electrification, getting electricity to every occupancy in the country. This is how we were able to do it. So at the top, you have the TSO or the transmission grid. So that transmission grid or transmission system operator, which for us is PJM. PJM, by the way, stands for Pennsylvania, Jersey, and Maryland, but there are 14 states inside of PJM. I did see something, a question in the chat about the pictures on the screen. PJM just encompasses a bunch of different areas, multiple states, but that's all our transmission grid operator. That's the big, huge power plants down on the rivers, down at the lakes, the nuclear power plants you see up by Lake Erie. Then you see those really, really big transmission lines that go across our state. That is the transmission grid. That's PJM. When they get down to your local area, they will have a transmission to distribution interface, a very large substation. You might see some of those huge ones. I think one I recognized for myself, I was right off of 77 in Independence. There's a really large substation there where the transmission grid drops down into Cuyahoga County. And that grid is where you come into First Energy, AEP, AES, Duke Energy, your municipal electric, your co-op electric. Those are what they call a distribution system operator. And if they are the big ones, they're the investor-owned utilities, or they're your co-ops or their municipalities. But that's where it comes down to when they hit large industrial customers, and you see all the individual properties and then spread out to more. And there are substations in here. Each one of these little bifurcations would be a substation that goes off to the other parts. So really big generation, those big old coal plants, nuclear power plants, natural gas plants, coming down through the big grid to your local grid, and then that local grid out to the individual occupancies. And down at the bottom, where you see the little houses and buildings, that is the grid edge. That's the edge of the grid from the utilities perspective, but it's where we all live and work. So that's where we want to have things better is at that grid edge. So what are we doing to this grid? Though the next slide on the left, oops, sorry. The next slide on the left there, you're going to see we have started to add DERs, distributed energy resources. We're putting in solar, we're putting in batteries, we put in wind turbines. And if you notice, they all connect to those properties at the grid edge. That would be behind the meter. So those are the type of systems that we're putting in, and they don't, if you've noticed, really make a huge difference for the grid itself. They're not giving that capacity to the grid that we need to be able to make sure that the grid itself can operate well when things are going bad. The really hot summers, for example. So yes, you can help yourself, and I have mine here at my house that I can do this. But the next level is the picture on the right. That's where we're starting to take these distributed energy resources and use them not just behind the meter, but so-called through the meter so they can support and provide systems and services to the transmission grid. By the way, your transmission grid really does come all the way down to your house. It's just that the system that gets operated is local, and then the key ways that the balance of the electric grid works is from the transmission grid all the way down to you. So you can help and you can participate in the transmission grid market by using your distributed energy resource, your microgrids, and combining distributed energy resources together so that you can actually service the grid, and that can actually make the grid better. That's where we're at now in Ohio. The slide on the right is where we're at now in Ohio and where we would like to build out more and more of this. But the real goal, where we really want to go, is this next slide. And believe it or not, when I first started looking at this type of stuff just about 10 years ago, as I was ending my public service career working into electrification, I went to the Public Utilities Commissions of Ohio's Power Forward Ohio Initiative meetings. And I was very excited that the state of Ohio was already working on how to make our grid an Internet of Things, a reactive grid that works together, that sends energy in bidirectional, and it's all connected with smart devices so that if individual components had to be able to separate because we were attacked by China or some kind of thing, we would be able to have a smart, nimble grid, a modern grid. Sadly, that all stopped with House Bill 6. When House Bill 6 and the corruption that get created, we were not able to do this. But this is where we need to go. And luckily, we were looking at that back in 2016, 2017. And hopefully, we can go back and do that again. So I almost refer to the words as go back to the future to get to back where we need to go. But this is where the grid is going to be more renewable energies at the utility scale and a lot of renewable energies at the grid edge with DERs, distributed energy resources, operating as virtual power plants across the state of Ohio. So hopefully that helped explain it, and I hit exactly at 1:30. Thanks, Rachel, for that one. I'm going to turn this over to Mike Foley for the rest of the discussion. He's going to give you the example of how Cuyahoga County is doing exactly this and how I think were you the first or are you the only countywide microgrid utility in the country? Is that correct?
Yeah, so we think we're the first county level utility created at least in the last 75 years. We thought we were the only one, and we were at a conference, and someone said, "Oh no, there's a county in California that
Well,
created something back in
one
the
of two is
1930s."
pretty impressive. So well done. I'm
Maybe
turning
a
it over to
couple more.
Mike.
Yeah. Yeah, so Michael, thanks for that. And Green Energy Ohio, thanks for putting this together. This is a good thing to do, a smart thing to do. So I'm Mike Foley. I'm the administrator for our new county utility, Cuyahoga Green Energy. And just a little, I think folks know where Cleveland and Cuyahoga is at, but, we're on the shores of Lake Erie. We've got 1.2 million people. We've got 59 separate communities in the county. We see ourselves in the future as climate change occurs and gets drier in the south and hotter in the south, and there's going to be storms are going to be more severe. We see ourselves as a climate migration destination in the future, and so we are trying to be cognizant of that and prepare for that. We've got a lot of fresh water and a lot of land, but we've got a really bad utility grid, which we're going to talk about in a second. So, Michael, if you can go to the next slide. So we created our new utility in 2022, and this was kind of built out of frustration with trying to figure out how to. We'd had this idea about microgrids. We still have a heavily industrial community in Cuyahoga County. We make a lot of things still, but we've got a grid that is just fragile. And we started hearing both from municipalities and from manufacturers, hey, come on, the power's going down for no reason. What's going on? We're losing product. We're losing workforce. We have to send workforce home. We're not able to ship things out because they're behind electric doors, and we're losing our ability to send product out to things. So we kind of did a lot of kind of thinking about this, and we were frustrated with First Energy, which was our investor-owned utility in Northern Ohio. And we said, wow, my gosh, we are a county that is a charter county. We're like a municipality in some respects. Most municipalities have their own charters. Cuyahoga County has its own charter. And so we did a lot of legal research, and we kind of figured out or discerned, and we've got opinions from the Attorney General, the state legislature, and law departments all over the place that, hey, we could create our own utility as a county because we're a charter county. And so we pulled the trigger on that in 2022. And one of the things we really wanted to focus on was clean energy. And microgrids, and trying to minimize the amount of disruption in people's lives because the grid was so fragile. So if there's a way that we could figure out how to become a utility and buttress the fragility of the grid by making it more resilient, making it greener, and also making it economically available to use, that's what we wanted to do. So we are focusing right now on a couple things. We won a huge federal award from the US EPA. We're working with the city of Paynesville and the city of Cleveland and Cuyahoga County. We've got about $190 million worth of solar projects that we're going to be putting on landfills and brownfields and some large scale energy users in the county. But the big thing we think is like kind of the cutting edge stuff is the microgrid districts that we're creating. So Michael talked about a microgrid for kind of mostly what's for a specific kind of property. So you've got your local generation, maybe rooftop solar, maybe you've got a battery, the grid goes out, you're able to island off, and you've got your kind of microgrid for that one specific facility. We're trying to build that out a little bit and create districts in the county where the county is the utility, the distribution level utility for a number of local manufacturers and industrial customers. And that we will run distribution lines, we'll put in a lot of local solar, we'll be taking power off of the transmission grid that Michael talked about. But when that grid goes down or when it gets really expensive, we'll be able to island off that grid and create our own electricity in order to reduce costs or keep power up. The thing about this focus is that we don't have to, as kind of municipal-like utility, we don't have to take over the whole grid. In fact, we can't take over the grid. We don't know how to do that. We don't have the capacity to do that. But for us, this is kind of the starting point where we've got some problem child areas in our region that really do need resiliency. We want to put as much green energy in as possible, and we think the economics are going to work. So we're going to start off with some local microgrids, and I'm going to talk about Euclid in the next slide over. But the other thing is when we got permission to do this from our county, they said, boy, hey, this is weird. County governments don't do this so much. This is not something that we're used to or understand that. The kind of concept, and so we really fully we're gonna let you go and try to prove the concept and get this thing up and off the ground. But we really need you to minimize the risk to the county, and to the extent that you can use other folks' money, investors' money, third party money to help construct properties and microgrid projects. That's what we really want you to do. And so we've been able to do that for the most part. And we've got a number of grant funds and from EPA and the Department of Energy. But we also hired a really smart company called Compass Energy Platform that is there to kind of help us build out these microgrid districts that we're creating. So they are working right now to go and find other people's money, investors' money, that will help build out these projects. Investors will get paid back long term through the sale of power on a per kilowatt hour level basis over time. So there's everyone pays 11, 12, 13 cents a kilowatt hour. They will get paid back through the sale of power that comes to the county, and we'll be able to pay back investors for this build out, and then we will own all of the infrastructure. So right now we are working in the city of Euclid, and Michael, if you can go to the next slide. So Euclid is this super cool suburb of Cleveland. It is a city of about 50,000 people. It's pretty interesting. It's got a really heavy manufacturing base right in the middle of the city. It has had a lot of issues around resiliency. So there are a lot of heavy manufacturing companies there who have power outage problems. And they scratch their heads, they yell, they scream, hey, kind of utility, First Energy, we were power outages. We're having to send people home from work because machinery's we're not being able to put them on the machineries that they're using, or they'll have power quality issues. So they'll have sags in the power coming through, and then surges. Right. We had one company that lost like a $5,000 piece of equipment because they had a power surge come through. It blew out the equipment, and then the people who are working on that piece of equipment, they had to go. $5,000 for a big company like this wasn't a big thing, but they had to go buy a new piece of equipment to replace it, which took 2 weeks. So the people who were working on that piece of equipment were basically not able to be employed or deployed to work on the equipment. So a lot of issues with just power quality and it's kind of manufacturing and becomes smarter and needs to have kind of stability in the electrons flowing through because you've got this kind of integration of smart technology now in manufacturing, it's a real issue for a lot of folks there. So Euclid has been this great kind of partner to work with on this first project. They've got a very progressive city council and mayor who care about climate action, but they've also got this great history of kind of being a leader around municipal thought, I guess. And so they were the famous Supreme Court case back in 1926. Euclid was the test child for urban zoning, basically, urban planning and urban zoning. And so they've kind of got this built into their DNA that they are, this is kind of new, interesting things that are of importance they want to take up the charge on. So next slide, Michael. So as I said, they've got this big manufacturing, vital manufacturing district. They've got some employers who have long-term contracts with the Department of Development. They're major employers in this area. They do a lot of defense contract, but they do a lot of welding. They do a lot of building of hoses and painting, paint equipment, or paint supplies. So there's a lot of kind of just basic heavy manufacturing that occurs in this district that we're working in. When we've met with them, they're concerned about expansion because of power quality issues, to be honest with you. So they want to build out, they want to grow, and this power quality issue is just an issue that folks are concerned about. They're also just concerned about the price of power. So we talked earlier about the price of power is rising. Michael talked about the capacity component of people's bills a little bit, that there's not enough capacity on the grid to meet the demand. And so there's this capacity market that has skyrocketed in terms of charges. So one of the things that we believe we're going to be able to help out the manufacturers is with both reliability. We're going to put green energy into the network, into the distribution network that are created, reliability, but also economics is going to be really important, because we will be able to, when power is the most expensive, we'll be able to get off of the transmission grid and use local generation of power at that point to minimize the capacity charges. And when power is the most expensive, we'll be able to take them off the transmission grid and utilize the local power that we've got generated through solar, some natural gas, and batteries. So next slide, Michael. So this is just kind of an outline of, we've kind of got two sections of the microgrid that they're developing. One is kind of south of I-90. You can see there's Lincoln Electric is over there, BWXT, Hosemaster, large manufacturers of stuff who employ a whole bunch of people who are having all these power quality issues. So we will be building our own substation. We'll be tapping into a transmission line that runs right through this kind of network of buildings on the left. And we will be building out our own distribution lines. And those distribution lines will be underground. One of the things that helps with resiliency is if you've got underground distribution lines rather than above ground distribution lines, you're minimizing or mitigating storm damage, cars running into telephone poles or utility poles, things like that. So we will be having underground distribution lines going directly to customers. The second phase on the right is we'll be running up north of the highway, and there's a whole bunch of municipal facilities in the north. So you've got a wastewater treatment facility, you've got City Hall, you've got the high school, the middle school, a public library. The Polka Hall of Fame is one of those numbers, 16 or 17, believe it or not. So we will be working with the city of Euclid to also incorporate them into the microgrid, so that while we have our microgrid will be working on economic development with the large manufacturers, we will also be building resiliency into city services. And the city can use those, if power is out and, big storms and people need to come in, charge their cell phones up or get cooling in the summer, or, when there's disaster response needed, that will assist with the city's ability to respond dramatically for those events. So next one, Mike. Next slide. So a couple things about our microgrid is we will be connected directly to the larger national transmission grid. We will build our own substation, tap into the transmission line. So we will not be going through first Cleveland Electric Illuminating Company, which is the First Energy distribution network, right? So we will become the distribution utility for these customers. No intermediary between us and the national transmission grid. We're going to have a lot of solar, at least 5 megawatts of solar on rooftops. We're going to have battery storage on site, so that helps with both power quality, but also short outages and when we need to reduce peak demand in this hot summer months, that will be the battery will be around for that. And then we will have some natural gas gen sets. While we would love to not have any natural gas at all and just operate solely on renewables and buying renewable energy off the transmission grid, we just know that we're going to need some natural gas gen sets for when we've got potential large power outages or long power outages, and solar doesn't work or battery is kind of diminished. But also to help with those peak costs during, when it gets really expensive in the summer. So we're really working to minimize the amount of hours over the course of a year that we would be using natural gas gensets. So say we'll have our own substation, we'll have our own underground wires. The wholesale, the power we're buying off the transmission grid will be green. So we will, as part of our kind of charter, I guess, is that we will be buying clean electrons, green electrons. It could be, solar from Southern Ohio, it could be wind from Iowa, but we're not buying, our moniker is Cuyahoga Green Energy, right? And this is something that Cuyahoga County cares about. We will not be buying non-green electrons for the power coming off the transmission grid. So we think we're going to have, we will be providing higher energy quality. We've got locally provided resilience. We'll be able to shave peaks and bring cost savings to people. We'll be able to, as we develop tariffs, we'll be billing our customers, right? At the end of the day, they will be Cuyahoga County Green Energy customers. We'll be able to blend all these kind of tariffs in a simplified bill for customers. And the thing we need is we will have power purchase agreements with these customers for at least 20 years. So we are asking, and this will be a big ask, but so far we've got a lot of uptake or a lot of interest from large customers is, we want long-term contracts because we want to be able to guarantee, we want to know what our power costs are going to be for a long period of time. Both customers like that, but also folks who are investing in our utility want that as well. So next slide, Mike. So as I said, we hired Compass as our utility partner. They're practiced and smart about kind of both microgrid development, but also helping to find financing. And they operate as kind of this platform to bring in, solar companies, engineering firms, construction companies. We're working right now with the trades, the building trades. We've got a real desire to have making sure that all of our projects are union labor, right? So they're a good partner for us to do kind of things that we're not expertise in. I mean, we're getting smarter every day and about this stuff, but we really need someone who's kind of on the ground, has experience working on this. So next slide, Mike. So I guess the takeaway from us is that, and our goal is we hope that this could be a model, right? That what we're doing is that, right now there's probably about 50 to 60 cities in the state that have their own municipal utility. And municipal utilities are not subject to the rules of the State Public Utility Commission. They can set their own rules. They can, build out where they think they've got much more flexibility, right? So we at the county are now kind of like a municipal utility in that our county council is kind of our oversight board, basically. And so we think that the model that we're creating, where we are a a municipal like utility, where we don't have to take over all the customers. We can't take over for all the customers right now, is something that other municipalities or other local governments may want to look at. At a time when you've got investor-owned utilities that are have a lot of power in this state, and to be able to take some of that ability back to make decisions at a local level about how your electricity grid is going to be deployed and where it's going to be deployed, what's the generation sources, all that stuff, we think is really interesting. And I think a lot of other people think it's interesting too. We've got a lot of interest from across the country. And hey, Cuyahoga County, what are you guys doing? We've been asked to speak in a number of national conferences over the last year now, just to kind of explain what we're working on. So we think that what this does is it helps with, minimize, while we develop this microgrid model, these microgrid districts that we're creating help, lessen the impact of extreme weather events, which are not going to lessen, protect against rising utility costs, which are not going to lessen, improve energy quality. We've got abilities to make sure that we've got, we can deploy, newer transformers, better distribution lines, substations in a much easier, we think, at least initially, cost-effective way than having to rely on the larger utility to come in and make decisions around that. Basically, it gives us more control over our energy future at the county level. And electricity is a thing. I keep saying, I say this. I think we all know this. Electricity is a thing that's not going to go away, right? It's more and more and more and more and more important every day. And with, data centers and AI becoming more and more of a thing, the grid and its fragility has more and more and more demands on it. So where local governments, I think, have better control over that and can address problem child areas and needs, then I think that I'm hoping that what we're doing is successful, and I'll be able to brag about this in a couple of years. And oh my God, this microgrid district we created in Euclid was the start of a big thing that seems to have some sway or some hold somewhere. So that's kind of what we're doing in Cuyahoga County. Michael, I don't think I have any more slides after this, do I? I don't. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about what we're doing, and more than happy to take some questions.
All right, before we go to Q&A, I just want to let you know that the rest of this series is coming up. One of the big ones is going to be kind of answering some of the questions that were asked. What are all the values you can get from a microgrid? One of the things that I mentioned in the beginning, but didn't kind of just glossed over relatively quickly, is a municipal microgrid has a mission critical responsibility. Municipalities have to be able to respond for public safety every single day and disasters every single decade or so. So they are responsible to be available and to be able to handle all that. And if you're going to have an electric-based system from which to respond, you're going to have an energy system that makes sure that that works just as well. The nice thing is that style of microgrid and that style of energy systems already being developed around the world by our military. So our Army and Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard bases are getting microgrids, and I think they're around 80% now of the microgrids across the world. Sorry, military bases across the world have microgrids. So the island of Guam, for example, was hit by a typhoon. I think it was last year. And when it got hit, they asked if they needed to have people respond out to Guam to help out with the island who had no power for many days. And the island leadership said, oh, no, we're okay. We're just going to go work with the military base. And why did the military base have all the power it needed? They have a microgrid. So there's the example that we're trying to follow there. One of the things I liked about the Cuyahoga County example is to actually leverage these smaller systems by putting them all into one bigger system. That's a perfect microcosm of what we're trying to do statewide. So it's a great example of what's possible. And you don't necessarily have to have a transmission grid level connection, but if you do, that's the best way to go. It's the easiest way to go. And that makes it also an economic development opportunity. So we will be having a series, hopefully after the municipal one, we're going to try to work on one for commercial industrial to talk about the economic perspective of having microgrids in industrial parks and in commercial parks. If you can have better quality power, power that doesn't have surges or problems, power that doesn't drop for just a few seconds, and those few seconds mess up the production line that you have going on in your factory. Power and electricity is really, really important stuff for our economic development opportunities at municipal level. And then lastly, the use of distributed energy resources around the states to make the grid better. This, and I neglected to mention it, but it will definitely be part of our values next session, is how you can actually use DERs around your state to make the grid operate in a better way. And I think that answers that Lakewood and Barberton question. Why did the power have to go out just because it got hot? Well, it's because there was too much demand on the grid. Well, how do we lower the demand? We provide power at the local grid edge level to then lower the overall demand of the grid so that doesn't happen. And the example is they've already done it in Vermont and they're doing it in Texas. Texas, as we all recall, remember they lost all their power when it got cold, but they also have a lot of problems when it's hot. It's hot in Texas a lot. They did not have a thermal event last year that shut down their grid, and their grid is almost statewide. ERCOT's huge because they put out distributed energy resources. So they're doing what we need to do here in Ohio. So we've got examples to follow, and starting with Cuyahoga County, what wonderful things they're doing up there. So I also noticed in the chat somebody asked about what county people are from. So if you wouldn't mind, throw in your name and your if you're willing to share your name and your location in the chat so other people who are in your area can connect with you. And that also kind of verifies to us that we're reaching people all the way around the state because for Green Energy Ohio, it is all of Ohio. So next session, we're going to talk about the values that you get from a microgrid. We call it stacking because it really is a lot of values that all add up. Our focus, of course, though, resiliency, economics, and security. You heard it from Mike with Cuyahoga County. We want to do the same thing statewide. Session 3 will be much more into the technology. We really are just glossing, just touching on it on this first session. You're going to learn a lot more about all the parts of microgrids. Session 4 will be the process of if you wanted to do one, how do you get there from the initial assessment all the way to actually building out plans and actually building these things on your infrastructure, on your buildings, on your rooftops, on your parking lots. Session 5 will be financing, and everybody always wants to know about that one. Mike hit on the power purchasing agreement, the PPAs for 20 years. Great way to do it. There are lots of investors, just got to get the right ones who like to have a long-term guaranteed return because all we're doing here is monetizing the sun. By using solar plus storage microgrids, you're basically getting paid for sunshine landing on your roof or your parking lot onto your solar panels. So we'll be getting into all those type of technologies. And of course, on the last session, session 6, I'll be coming back as one of the speakers on that one. I'm going to host throughout, but I won't be one of the speakers again until session 6. And that's where we're hoping to have this program, this distributed power program, at least the framework built out so we can help municipalities and of course anybody else who's interested find their way toward microgrids. And one of the best ways to do that is to have enough interest and enough capacity into that market for the building out of microgrids, not the energy market, but the interest in the actual business to get businesses to want to fund it and businesses to want to make it happen here, essentially like Texas. Because if Texas can do it, why can't we do it? We're just a few years behind Texas. So they now know that Ohio is open for business for green energy and for distributed energy resources around our state. So hopefully we can make that happen. So with that in mind, we have a few questions that were in the chat. I'll hit those real quick. I saw one was asking what is an RTO, and that's that transmission system operator for all of the state of Ohio. That's PJM. So it doesn't matter where you are in the state, we are all under PJM. That's your transmission grid. Somebody asked about the different maps and the prices that we had on that problem page. The different maps, that's the energy capacity market. And I am not an expert, and I'm going to guess that nobody on this call is an expert. I just read a book about the Koch family and what they do in the energy world. And one of the things they do and what Enron did, if everybody remembers Enron, the smartest people in the room that all went to prison, the Enron folks kind of designed this energy market, how to trade energy from available energy resources, to other energy, be able to use that energy. That's how that capacity market stuff works. And as you could tell, PJM simplified it into just one big, large PJM capacity market. So I think that's why the map changed. as what was inside those things. Somebody mentioned their municipal electric prohibition to not let them put energy on the grid. That's kind of a misnomer. So I am also in a municipal electric community. So I can and do send power to the grid. But I get it through what they call net metering, which means if I'm not buying energy and I have excess energy and I put some back on the grid, my meter is smart and is a bidirectional meter, so I can send energy back. So technically, I am sending energy to the grid, but I signed an agreement to do net metering, and that's the only market for cash, for money, the value of energy market that I'm participating in. We're hoping to change that. We're hoping to make it possible that you could be part of that virtual power plant and get into the capacity market and make the larger amount of money. That's part of what Green Energy Ohio is working with. And to do that, we are going to have to get the municipal electric community as well as all the other utilities around the state to actually work with us to develop a program to make that possible. Because we really need to do it. No matter where you are, we need more capacity added to the grid, and we can't just rely on net metering to make that go. Trying to think. I hit those points. Any other questions in the Q&A? I see a bunch of people responding with some locations. Thank you very much. We are all over the place, even all the way down in the middle of nowhere in Lawrence County. Does anybody even know where Lawrence County is? I'm teasing because that's one of our board members who's on the call, and he'll be on our next capacity. And
Yeah,
yeah,
question for
Mike, good response. If you wanted to, technically, as a municipality, you could take over your streetlights. You could take over and create a utility. That is a whole nother session, if not a series of sessions. But if you're interested, we'll actually be able to do that. We did see a question about recording. We are going to record all of the sessions, and we are at 2:01. So unless something
you
comes
got.
in the next 60
Yeah,
seconds,
Patrick's
go
hand is
ahead.
up, Michael.
Oh, Patrick's hands up. Rachel, can you handle that one?
Yeah, Patrick, looks like you're good to go ahead and ask. It looks like you came off mute there.
Thank you. Gentlemen, great presentation. Thanks for taking the time to put it together. My question is, what role does Cleveland Public Power have in Cuyahoga Green Energy's plans?
They none at the moment. I mean, we won a big EPA award, 130 million bucks basically, and they are getting about 14 million out of that to do solar on a couple of landfills. But in terms of our development and build out, we're developing a landfill project in the city of Brooklyn and selling power into the city of Cleveland. We're using PERPA. I will go through what PERPA is, but it's a vehicle to sell the power into the city of Cleveland. But in terms of our microgrid work, they are not active in that right now. So they have, they've got their own utilities. They've got issues they have to solve in terms of economics and resiliency and reliability on their own. But at least for the time being, they have not been interested in kind of working with us or cooperating or collaborating with us as we build out our microgrid. I should say this: is we at the county level, we're not the utility for the whole county, right? And we have to get authority or permission from any municipality that we deal with. Right now, we've got about 7 cities that have raised their hands and said, "Hey, county, we would love you to come in and work with us on developing projects and programs." And we haven't gone out past those 7 because I've really got to get these first projects up and running, and they've got to be perfect, right? So right now, they're mostly first ring suburbs outside the city of Cleveland, and we've got a good kind of cohort of cities that we're working with. Once we kind of get past this first couple years of building out construction operations, then we'll build out hopefully past that and get a better relationship or get a relationship with the city of Cleveland Public Power on if we can cooperate on stuff.
Thank you.
And folks, don't forget to realize this is not just new to you. This is new to the grid operators too. This is a different way of thinking about how they operate their system, which is why it can be so complicated. So we are over time. Thank you everyone for attending. Those of you who are signed up for the whole series, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks especially to Mike Foley for being our special speaker today, and especially with the Cuyahoga County example. Thank you to the executive. Got to give him a credit every once in a while. He does something good.
No, Chris Renane is our executive, and he's great. He's wonderful.
Great guy. And we're very excited to see what happens with Green Energy Ohio. And thank you everyone for attending. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Bye-bye.